Hi, it's Dr. Salcedo, your conscious gynecologist. I'm so glad you're here. Today, we're going to be talking about how challenging it is to be a parent of low-carb kids. It's so challenging, and I've got children right now, 7, 8, and 13. And man, is it hard to control what goes on at school with all of the crazy food that they have and all of the different kinds of celebrations there always is. There's like birthdays every other day. Someone's always bringing a donut. It's just incredibly challenging. So if you feel frustrated with how to maintain this lifestyle with your kids and family, you've come to the right place. I'm so glad you're here. Let's get to it. So you may remember the way I became a low-carb advocate and gynecologist is because I have personal issues with gestational diabetes and pregnancy. And I became really frustrated with the recommendation to eat carbohydrates, which would eventually make my blood sugars go up. And then I may have needed insulin. And so that just was really frustrating to me. And I really started to kind of dive into why what the physiology is in pregnancy, but also postpartum, and what really my risk was. Now, I'm a Mexican American. My risk of getting type 2 diabetes is 50% because I've had gestational diabetes. And so because of that, I wanted to be really careful with figuring out what is the best lifestyle for me. And for me, I'm a diobesogenic. Like, I'm a person who is really thin, but carbs like very much affect me. And so I knew I needed to stay away from them. And so that's just kind of how I do it. One of the ways that I figured would be really helpful with teaching my family and my kids how to eat was to look at cultures that were pretty successful with eating all kinds of different foods. And the French really spoke to me. And so I actually got this book, French Kids Eat Everything, and I started reading it with my second child. And I realized that we just eat way too much in the modern American culture, and there's snacks everywhere. And it was those snacks that were actually making my kids want to eat more and more junk. And so I really model how we eat in our household according to a lot of what this book and this author, Karen LeBillon, what she does in her family, which means that we eat 3 to 4 times a day max, okay? And the adults probably eat less than that. But I'm going to teach you exactly what we do in my house, and maybe this would help your family. Now, if you also remember that I'm also a ketogenic dieter and also lean kind of carnivore for the other medical concern that I have, which is endometriosis. And that is really what keeps a lot of my endometriosis symptoms at bay. But my kids, I'm a little bit more liberal because I want them to understand different foods. I want them to know when they're done and when they're full. And I want them to know about the macronutrients. I want them to know about carbohydrates and protein and fat. And they're really good at judging when they're full. And they eat pretty much anything. And so the other night we had barramundi fish and like a pumpkin squash soup, and they ate well. And so I just want to teach you how we do it, and maybe this would apply in your family. So first, breakfast usually involves some sort of scrambled egg and meat protein. So it'll be scrambled eggs and bacon. It'll be scrambled eggs with Parmesan cheese and sausage. It may even be like a McDonald's style sandwich with like sourdough, 1 or 2 slices of sourdough bread, like the muffins with eggs and bacon or sausage and cheese. And we usually try to keep the carb content for my kids less than about 30 grams per meal, which for me, that's a lot. I can't do that. But for them, they have a really great palate. They are not, unfortunately, or fortunately, they're not having any real medical problems. And so if I keep them at less than 30 grams per meal, they're pretty good, and they don't get hungry, and they don't are not irritable for food or snacks. And so for sure, we do breakfast. Then we do lunch, and lunch is usually some sort of leftover from dinner. Okay, so what we do in my house is we get those metal thermoses, And we basically, in the morning, we warm up the food from the night before and put it in the thermos with some sort of dessert. Okay. So the dessert would be like half an apple, half a peach, maybe some crackers, maybe a few strawberries, but something small and always less than a half a cup, or keeping below that 30 grams of carbohydrates so that it doesn't overwhelm their system. And the meat protein is usually something that we had for dinner. Sometimes it's a ribeye, sometimes it's carnitas, sometimes it's a soup, but something that we had for dinner the night before. And we always warm it up and send it off to school. Then for dinner, usually that for dinner, what we do is we kind of have a 3-course meal. So the first course is usually some sort of veggie when they're the most hungry, and I know that I'm going to get the most buy-in for trying new types of foods. So that's when I introduce green beans with lemon cream sauce. That's when I introduce some broccoli with lots of butter and maybe a little bit of curry powder on top. Sometimes I'll introduce a cauliflower soup. And a lot of these recipes can be found on the Diet Doctor website. And that's really what I start my kids off with, just a small amount, usually less than half a cup, or just a small plate of whatever vegetable that I know that they might be trying out. And I don't make them eat anything, okay? And so in our 3-course meal, it's some sort of vegetable, a meat protein, and a very small dessert. Okay. And the meat protein's where it really gets good. So sometimes we'll have like a seafood chowder, which for us means like lots of cream, some seafood, some shrimp, maybe some fennel, and some saffron. Sometimes it's a ribeye, sometimes it's turkey carnitas, sometimes it's real carnitas, sometimes it's a hamburger with like patty, a piece of cheese on top, like a lettuce wrap, a lettuce burger. Sometimes we'll do ahi tuna, but some sort of delicious meat protein that I know will sit well the next day. Now, usually for the next day, I don't really send fish with the kids because I just don't want like their friends to be like, "Oh, that smells," and I don't want them to worry about that. But recently, my son came home the other day and was feeling really sad because we had a warm chicken salad with mayo, with a chicken breast, with sage, and we added some half cherries in it. And by the next day, it actually turned the chicken kind of pink. And so my poor son was like kind of made fun of because he was having pink or purple chicken. And he kind of came to me and was feeling really sad because he doesn't have pizza like everybody else. He doesn't have pizza pockets or sandwiches and things, and I understand it's really hard. And so we actually had to have a conversation with like the teacher because to remind the students like to not make fun of other children's food. And this is where I really feeling like really vulnerable because it's so hard to be a keto mom. It's so hard to be a low carb mom. And I don't want to come from the place of restriction, but mostly teaching my kids about what would make them full and what makes them feel not great. So then after the meat protein for dinner, then we have some sort of dessert. Okay. And so dessert could be lots of different things. It could be sliced pears with lime and salt, which is actually really delicious. It could be a slice of cantaloupe. It could be a tiny small porcelain jar of a little bit of ice cream, as long as it's like a full fat cream based ice cream. I'm not opposed to that as long as we really try to keep our carbohydrates less than 30 to 15 per meal. I think that's just fine. Now, for me, I know my triggers. I have to be really careful with that. But I think really teaching our families that you got to have something really great, like some really nice, delicious vegetables with a great meat protein. But in my family, we say we never make anybody, like, we never force kids to have anything in my house. I just know that among the vegetable course and the meat course, I'm going to include something that I know that my kids will like, either one or the other, so that they can have a little bit of dessert later. And that's it. Now, there is such a thing as the 4 o'clock snack. And so sometimes when my kids come home from school after they get, their uniforms off and they put their stuff away, their backpacks, we'll have a little 4 o'clock snack. And sometimes that's like charcuterie with a few crackers. Sometimes it's beef jerky. Sometimes it's a piece of sourdough toast with some butter. Um, I keep the carb content pretty low, and I realize that this is really loose carbs for a lot of folks that are watching, but it works well in my house. And really, we eat 4 times a day for the kids: breakfast, lunch, a 4 o'clock snack, and dinner. And that's it. We don't let them or encourage them to have snacks at any other time. And so then we stop hearing a lot of like the mom, I'm hungry, mom, I'm hungry. And a lot of times, if they're hungry, it's really because they're bored. And so, I tell them, don't worry, like we're going to eat. You're going to make it until dinner. You're going to make it until 4 o'clock snack. It's going to be just fine. But have you guys been able to figure out what to do about the snacking at school? They have a break time. My kids start school around 7:50. At like 9 o'clock, 9:30, they're already having their break, their snack. And I'm like, what the heck? They just had this giant breakfast and they're really well satisfied. They didn't have cereal. They didn't have any of that. And they always laugh because they're like, Mom, we probably don't even need snack anymore. We're good. And so, but sometimes they want it, and I'll just send like a string cheese or something, or maybe a cup of yogurt, full fat yogurt. But yeah, I don't know. And I would just love to hear your suggestions about what you do for parties and all those things that, like, all these celebrations. And I don't really want to come from a place of excluding my kids or, trying to restrict them, but I just want to teach them like what foods make them good and what make them feel good and what doesn't. So for me, I am very keto and carnivore leaning, for my family, my kids. I'm just a mom, just like all of you guys, just trying to figure it out. But I hope you felt this video was helpful, and we'll see you at the next one.